It's great to see that everyone has stayed till the end. Thank you for keeping the energy. And this session is called Images Database. I am Nerea Calvillo, and I've been your hostess downstairs, but I'm also one of the co-eyes of the project. And I am the leg of the project focused on the arts and the social sciences. So we've been trying to integrate the arts not only as public engagement or as illustrations of what science does and can do, but also to try to think about how can the arts be part of the research process and contribute to the research process. We've collaborated with Ali Clark and Surrey Hills Arts in the co-production of some pieces, workshops, but an interesting question came when we were doing, as Prashant mentioned this morning, we were starting to do the collective database on the benefits of GBGI in many different challenges. And something that we realized was that there's hardly any images of these GBGIs. There's lots of parks, there's lots of rivers maybe, but there's very few of the more infrastructural maybe, but also we realized that the imaginary that exists out there in terms of what nature does and can do and how it looks like is very limited. So we decided to create a new database that is open, that can be accessed for anyone to be used. And for that, we co-designed, together with Gonzalo Herrero Delicado, something that we called the Reclaim GBGI International Competition and Commissions. So I had the privilege to develop it with Gonzalo, who's a curator, educator, and architect who explores the impact of the climate crisis and digital technologies through artistic design and architecture practices. He's actually, at the moment, project curator for the Serpentine Galleries in London, was director of the EcoCity World Summit 2023, and was for several years as well curator of the architecture program at the Royal Academy of Arts, where he curated, amongst other projects, the Eco-Visionaries exhibition and Invisible Landscapes. Please, Gonzalo.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much to the Reclaim Network for inviting me to curate, together with Nerea, this project. Thank you to Nerea. I would also want to thank two people that are behind the scenes, and those are Mark Simmons and Charlotte Leden for not only supporting this project, the photography competition and commission, but also for putting together this conference. So thank you so much for the two of them. And now I'm going to try to expand a little bit on what Nerea was explaining and what was the aim behind this photography competition and commission. No work? Yeah, yay. Is it the second one? Yeah, I guess so. The second slide, yeah? This is useless. Yeah. Oh, yeah, now it works. Perfect. So this project had two parts, as I mentioned. The first one was this international competition that we launched, I think, at the beginning of the year, not just before Christmas, where we were inviting the public, not only established photographers, but anyone, to submit their photographs and to expand on the knowledge and their common or general understanding of what the GBI's green-blue infrastructures are. And how those are understood across the globe, not only in the UK, but internationally. For doing that, we announced on eFlags, which is a very prominent platform, the call, and we received 350 submissions from literally all over the world, and with an extremely high quality of photographs that were responding to these 5 sections. So this was part of the call. One, obviously, best picture, the overall winner. Then most unique GBI, so it was trying to respond to what are the most unusual and unique GBIs that the submitter could find. Forgotten Cities, which is also part of the theme for the conference, underrepresented communities and how those communities, which are very well researched in the academic level, are presented and connected to the GBIs. And one last section that it was on other natures, trying to go beyond what we understand and enlisted on the GBIs and trying to explore what other forms of GBIs are happening all over the world. We offer £400 per category. The competition was judged by me, together with Paulomi Basu, who is an artist and very connected to themes around ecology, and Lucia Pietrogiusti, who is curator and also a colleague and head of ecologists at Serpentine. These are the winners. We were extremely, extremely pleased with the quality of the work. Some of them, you could tell that they had a very developed technique, and they were potentially it was anonymous, so we didn't know what was the profile of the photographer behind the photographs. But we could tell that there were many of them that they had very high quality and they understand and know how to take good photographs. But also there are some others that were a little bit more naive in the way they were taken. The previous one, we got the overall winner, was from Kolkata in India. This one was from Malaysia. Featuring this palm restaurant that we couldn't really tell if it was an artificial landscape or a natural made one, if it was a theme park or a natural non-human made environment. This other one, which is you can even tell that it had the date here, it was from 2014. Many people were digging into 1 minute. Forgotten Cities. The one was from Sao Paulo, looking at the diversity of these urban gardens that are being put together in one of the most derelict areas of Sao Paulo, or this one that was from Madrid. And it's this kind of infrastructure, probably made by the neighbors for bees and biodiversity to grow in this specific corner. In parallel to the competition, we wanted to have a focus on the UK. And we organized this commission with 3 different artists that we were researching over months and asking people for suggestions about who are the people that we should commission this project to. We tried to bring a lot of diversity, not focusing on big cities, but trying to go a little bit more remote and an area that could be considered in a way forgotten cities. Because they don't have the attention from the government, and they don't have enough funding for developing the nature-based solutions. So eventually we found the 3 wonderful artists that are going to present their work that are located in Livingstone, or they were featuring Livingstone in Scotland. That was Alicia Bruce, who lives in Edinburgh, Cumbria in England, and Cardiff in Wales. With Alistair Debling for Cumbria and Robin Chaddah for Cardiff. These are the 3 of them, and now I'm going to stop speaking and hand over to the first one is
Alistair.
Alistair. And Nerea is going to make a brief introduction. Thank you.
Okay, Robin then. I'm going to introduce you very briefly. So, Robin Chaddah-Duke is a photographer and filmmaker currently based in Cardiff, and he works with a grassroots documentary approach. His work revolves around exploring the experiences of marginalized and minority communities within Britain. The work is grounded in historical contexts and aims to inspect how cultures and identities are changing.
Hello everyone, I'm Robin. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you everyone for having me. I'm just going to try and get my head around this before I start. You press this one? Yeah. Okay, cool. So you've heard a little bit about me, so hopefully this helps you understand my sort of approach and interest into making the commission. What I was interested in exploring is a cultural landscape of a city and the people's relationship to the green spaces. So what kind of people access the space and how it changes based on where they live and how they're able to interact with it because of things like class, whether they can go in and out of work. So I began to research spaces that are accessible to a diverse range of communities. Luckily in Cardiff it's the third greenest city in the UK, so it's not usually associated with lots of green space, but we're quite blessed with quite a lot of it. So lots of space in other cities, I keep hitting this, sorry. Lots of space that isn't accessible to people from diverse backgrounds in lots of other cities is really accessible in Cardiff. So I walked and cycled around the city and spoke and photographed people who use the spaces. So some images were made with strangers, like this couple. They have an allotment. I was really trying to get in here for ages, and I had to like climb over this fence, and then they let me in and we started chatting, and they were kind of complaining about how expensive it was. So it's not actually that accessible. But there's some were strangers, and then others were made with friends and communities that I've been working with for a long time. So this was a family who attend the India Center, which is a Hindu community center and a temple. So this was taken after puja on a Saturday afternoon, and they were just enjoying the sunlight. So that approach allowed me to sort of engage with groups that I'm really working with often, and that was quite interesting because I saw a new side of their life, like where they go to hang out after work, or like this girl, for example, she was on her walk home from school. She saw me taking pictures down by the park, and she said she sits there after school sometimes and relaxes. So that was really nice. So it sort of allowed me to see the ways that these spaces are used by lots and lots of people, and how some people have access in quite an easy way and how others have to travel. And it's quite interesting looking at the differences of class there, especially. Some people, they're just out on like an afternoon walk just in the middle of the day, and other people say, like, I've driven here for ages because I needed to really relax and get some downtime. As we were saying, like benefits for health as well. I think that was super interesting, having those kind of discussions. And my aim was to firstly challenge stereotypical narratives surrounding the people of Wales. I think as I moved from England to Wales, it was really interesting seeing quite a diverse cultural landscape in Wales. It isn't something I usually associate with Wales. I think I see it as quite like a white Christian nation, but I think over time it's quite opening a lot of doors to refugees, asylum seekers in Wales. So it sort of opened my eyes to that, and I wanted to look at that through the work. Like this gentleman, he doesn't associate with like a typical Welsh man, but he's probably a very Welsh guy. He's from Cardiff Docks. This was taken after prayer time at a local mosque, the oldest mosque in Wales. And then on top of that, I wanted to reflect the importance of green, blue, and grey space to people from a plethora of contrasting cultures. So yeah, I don't have any more pictures to show. But yeah, thank you for having me, everyone. Alicia.
Thank you, Robin. One thing that we should mention is that the commission was quite challenging because the list of GBGIs, green and blue infrastructures, was the same one as the scientists are using. So it has 49 typologies. So each of the artists had to try to find within their environment these typologies. And one of the objectives was to try to depict them as they are in their everyday aspect, whether there was rain, as we'll see now, the people that use them, etc., to start to understand them not in an idealized way, but in a very grounded way. So next is Alicia Bruce, and sorry, and Alicia don't record this one. Me speaking about you. So Alicia Bruce has a really interesting approach to images because she depicts these landscapes, but always with something happening to them. Sometimes it's infrastructures that are half finished, sometimes are works in progress. So it's always these situations where nature is in between different stages. And she captivated us with her monograph called I Burn, But I Am Not Consumed. And it documents 16 years of Donald Trump's impact on a coastal Scottish community. And some of that flavor we can see in her depictions of Livingstone. Please, Alicia.
Hello. I'm just going to test that this works first. It does. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to Gonzalo and Nerea for inviting me to do this commission. These are possibly the most deadpan pictures I've ever made, but I'll tell you why, and you're from Falkirk, so you might understand. Livingstone is in the central belt of Scotland, so it's between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and it's what would be called one of Scotland's new towns. So in the sort of 1960s, they started to build these towns that were a bit based on an American model, where instead of living in slum conditions and tenements in cities, people were moved onto the sort of more greenbelt areas where they all had their own back garden, their own sort of, 2 up, 2 down houses, usually a garage, a driveway, that sort of thing, which is great in a lot of ways. People all have their private gardens, but what it means when you're contrast to Robin in Cardiff, which is a bit like the area that I live in, very sociable, you don't see anybody on the streets. And especially in February, that's my daughter. So just to show and if I did see anyone that I wanted to integrate in a picture with my list of GBIs, okay, I'll look for a bioswale and walking about Livingstone. Literally, I'd see a dog walker and they'd go, "Oh, sorry, dear," and off they'd go, and I'd be like, right, okay, I am a portrait photographer. And I really struggle to find people just naturally using the space, because the whole town is designed in a way that people get in their cars and they commute to where they work, which is usually Edinburgh, Glasgow, or an industrial estate within the central belt. So I had that problem. Or they would drive to a park and ride and get a bus to work. So a lot of the spaces, although I visited about 12 times, I didn't meet many people, but I did find a lot of GBIs. Here's a playground. And then this is a business park as well. It's called the Pyramids Business Park. And another thing about the Scottish new towns is there's this amazing BBC documentary called Meet Me at the Hippos, which is about the artists that were commissioned for the Scottish new towns. All of these towns in the 60s, when they were being built in the 70s, they'd have an artist commissioned to use up all the building materials, like the concrete and things. So there are some sort of recognisable points, like Hippos and Glenrothes. And I think that's a sort of humorous Scottish thing. So sometimes the sheep on these pyramids are spray painted different colours and that sort of thing. And it's so that people can find on the M8 or on the motorways different places. Another thing that Livingstone has a lot of is roundabouts, and all the roundabouts have names. So it's motorways, roundabouts, and houses with driveways. It was really hard to find a balcony with vegetation. I found 2 in the same building because there's hardly any flats in Livingstone. This is Almond Valley Visitor Centre, so an alpaca who is quite cute. I'll just click through some of them. I thought this cemetery was quite interesting, the way that the trees and the bushes were sort of growing around the gravestones and they were being maintained in a way where they were still seen. And the skate park is a really important part of Livingstone. It's internationally famous for skating. So that's a private garden. And yeah, I don't know what else to say actually about Livingstone other than it was very challenging with this list. It made me challenge what I thought my work was about and what my practice was about, because it was so hard to meet people. But what I did to sort of get round that was, I suppose I set myself my own set of rules, compositional rules and things, so that it would still work as a series of pictures and they might work together. This is the only green roof in the whole of Livingstone, and it took me 2 months to find it. I joined lots of Facebook groups. I know the local MP, Hannah Burdell, and she put a thing on all her social media. It took me ages to find this, and it was through a local Facebook group I found it. So it's on the side of a community centre. I quite like the 2 gnomes and the 2 I think I was just sort of entertaining myself with like visual things while I was there, and yeah, so I was honestly overjoyed. Oh, thank you. Overjoyed to find a green roof. And I have a green roof in my own garden on my bin shed. I think the lady's gone who was talking about them. Like, I'm really into a sedum green roof, but yeah, that was a challenge. And like Robin, I waited an hour outside allotments for anyone to turn up to get into these locked up allotments, and met this woman and her daughter, and she used to be a photographer. And she'd heard of my work. So when I did get to meet and engage with people, it was really lovely. So yeah, that's just a little flavour of the portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia, for your perseverance. It wasn't easy. Also, the weather, you didn't mention that.
Yeah, it was the rainiest winter that we've had.
The rainiest winter, and it was like, well, it's raining for 3 weeks, so I don't know what to do anymore. So thank you so much. And last but not least, Alistair Debling will come soon. And his work investigates multiple fields that are interconnected in conceptual ways. Queer nightlife, also ecology, military infrastructures, the relationship between the rural and the urban, and how there's tensions between all these landscapes where their limits are kind of difficult to trace, and also there are competing definitions of survival within them. So what it means to be natural or lively or abandoned. Thank you, Alistair.
Thank you very much, Nerea. I was based for this commission in Barrow and Furness, not far from where I live, in Cumbria. It's sort of on the periphery of the Lake District National Park and sort of in the periphery of England, really, right in the far northwest. It has an industrial history, used to be a very prosperous shipyard. It continues to have a prosperous shipyard in some ways, in that BAE Systems, the weapons manufacturer, still manufacture nuclear submarines in Barrow and Furness, but that wealth is sort of distributed unevenly, so there's some of the highest levels of deprivation in the country in certain parts of Barrow and Furness at the same time as very high paid jobs, but generally the people that have those jobs might not live in Barrow itself, either further out in the Lake District or in London. One of my first forays into Barrow visually was it's this amazing archive called the Sankey Collection. Edward and Raymond Sankey were a father and son duo who were based in Barrow and Furness. Edward Sankey started his shop there in 1895 and really documented life in Barrow and in the wider Lake District in like almost Google Street View detail. You can watch him basically through a series of photographs move from street to street in a tiny Lake District town and document every building very sort of methodically. So I was into that collection. Here's a great street tree check for one of the GBIs. He had all the big hitters like parks, lakes, canals, but also things like a verge, to see what a verge looked like in the early 20th or mid 20th century in Barrow and Furness was interesting. Also to see quite how manicured Barrow was back then versus now. Also much more industrial, like a lot of smog. Here's the main canal. So I sort of started by air with a drone, well, first with Google Maps and then a drone to get up and see some of these sites that the Sankeys had documented, and then started putting them together in these kind of diptychs and triptychs that pushed them a little bit into almost abstraction, where you kind of really had to look to figure out what was going on, and maybe an allotment could start looking a bit more like a, I don't know, abstract painting or something. I was also struggling to find people, or at least people were very willing to chat, but less willing to have their photo taken. But I was noticing these sort of like improvised garden spaces that people had set up, often in the otherwise grey spaces in between two terraced, like post-industrial, you know, like factory workers' terraces, Victorian terraces. And so I was thinking, okay, along the brief, how might we redefine what a planter looks like in urban space? And I like that out of that you kind of get this tactile idea about somebody's personality and energy that's gone into sort of upcycling this into something kind of beautiful. Very much in Barrow, it was like meeting it where it was. There was no nursery garden officially, but in the garden centre there was this sort of nursery section of young trees. After going around a few times with the drone and the digital camera, I went back with a film camera. Basically, you can develop black and white film in any plant. You just boil it up with some vitamin C and some washing soda, and you can process black and white film. So I used some dandelions because I thought they're in abundance and they would be least missed to develop this film. So that's the negative that it makes, but then sort of juggling that natural, artificial thing that was happening in some of these little gardens where you've got real flowers in a wheelbarrow, a watering can, an Easter bunny, some plastic flowers. Sort of drew on the negatives again with some Sharpie, so when you get a positive, you get this kind of interesting effects. Pushed it a bit further in this one with that is orange and pink highlighter on negative, and that is a bit of what I defined as riparian woodland, or as close as I could get to on the main canal. In 1 minute in Barrow, I mentioned BAE systems, which kind of literally architecturally looms over the town. But if you look close underneath it, there's actually a playground with some young kids swinging on the swings, or a verge up against the multiple layers of nuclear site boundary barbed wire and fences. So that's maybe like a theme, even though I've used a lot of different types of cameras and photography in the portfolio, as an idea of like looking and spending a bit more time and looking more closely. Barrow has a reputation for being not a great reputation locally in Cumbria, but actually the more time I spent there, the more it's like, there's a lot of green space, a lot of blue space, a lot of energy, a lot of local groups and individuals doing great things to make it a more colourful and exciting place to live. So something that looks sort of barren, if you came back in a week or so or look closely, then you start to see these colours like bursting out. And I'll just end on one of my favourite ones, which was at the cemetery, where these kind of artificial bouquets, real bouquets, somehow speaks to this idea of a patchwork of like the natural and unnatural things coexisting in these spaces, and like a green space not being undermined because there's like some fake flowers in it. It's part of what makes Barrow kind of colourful and dynamic. That's me.
Do we have time for the panel? Charlotte, Mark? Yeah, let's have a little bit. I'm taking... Do we have time, Mark?
Maybe a question each.
A question each. Okay, so please.
Well, while we are like grabbing the microphone, I would like to say that it was like wonderful, like working with all of you. Like we are seeing in all these images, along with all the submissions from the competition, will be available on Wikimedia, so they will become accessible to everyone. And that was one of the main aims of these two projects. It was like making accessible like this visual imagery of GBIs and going beyond like the kind of pictures that we saw on that poster, no, with like the very bright green and landscapes. It's just like now everyone will be able, when they are looking for the nature-based solutions, to grab one of these pictures in low res, in your case, so you hold the copyright. But yeah, it's wonderful because this is like kind of like expanding like the knowledge on the GBIs beyond the academia and the scientific knowledge, and making it accessible to everyone. So, first question.
Thanks very much. Amazing photos and work. I was very interested in what you were saying about lack of people, and you had a good explanation of why not. But with the allotments, do you think it was just that you were there at the wrong time? It's just, I can't, I just wonder, like a Sunday afternoon, would there be more people? It just seems strange to have the whole thing.
I think I've got an allotment myself, and I think it's to do with the time of year that we were commissioned, February, March. There's this thing that you're not meant to put your tatties in until you can sit on the ground without getting a cold bum. So, so the frost was probably still on the ground by the time so I think it's maybe to do with that. But yeah, I mean, I tried emailing allotment associations and all sorts, and it took eventually I just waited at the gate for someone. But what about Cardiff?
I think kind of similar. Everyone didn't want to be in the wet, but I had the same thing where I was emailing people, and I think people were quite precious about their allotments. Like the couple I was speaking to, that it took us ages to get it. We don't want you coming in. What if you show everyone and the photos go and everyone wants an allotment? And I think a little bit, protective over them. But we both got in the end, so it worked out.
I cheated.
Hello, Tilly Collins at Imperial College, and thank you so much for that. That was really interesting. And what I'd like to ask all of you is, how did your views of those kind of typologies of green space change when being sent to actually look at them?
Who wants to go first?
That's hard.
It made me really appreciate my own local community and the amount of community gardens and things and initiatives that are there. Not that I take them for granted, but but also we were saying today it was a bit like a pub quiz watching back all the competition. We were going, bioswale, rain garden. So yeah, it does, like, there's a new language looking at streets now, a new visual language, which is quite cool in a way. And my 8-year-old who came with me in the Easter holidays, she can now point out lots of things like permeable paving that we wouldn't have noticed before.
I think similarly, yeah. I think it made me very grateful to be in Cardiff, looking around and noticing the amount of green space there was and how accessible it was, especially speaking to these two after, and how much harder of a time they had. I felt really, really lucky that Cardiff had so much. But yeah, I think it was a new appreciation spending that much time out and about as well. It was really nice.
I think I maybe had underestimated. I was like, when I heard about the commission, I was like, well, I definitely, go to Barrow. It's like the most urban part of the Lake District, or Cumbria, and I just was stunned actually at how much green space and blue infrastructure there was if you just started looking hard. And was it Beth Parker was saying something about the small bits adding up, and that literally, like, a plant pot or a a pallet in an alleyway, like these little individual things that add up to quite a nice environment.
Thank you.
Is it on? Yeah. As outsiders, I'm going to call you outsiders, new to this realm, let's say, can you throw any light on why some of those communities don't look like they value and cherish their green spaces as much as you've described living in Edinburgh? What do you think the difference is? And we've all got preconceived ideas, but I'd really like to hear a fresh artistic view on that.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Oh gosh, was it complicated? Right. How do I make it easier? So we all work in this sphere. I think a lot of us work in this sphere already, and you're bringing fresh eyes to this sphere in a way. Looking at your photographs, it looked like a lot of the green spaces and the blue spaces were unloved, not particularly cherished. And I wondered if you had any interpretation of that, why that might be the case, compared with some of the areas that you live in and I just wondered what your bird's eye view of that was, really. Sorry, that was
Okay. Well, I think for myself, I do live in the areas I was photographing in, lots of the communities I spend time with, and I think that the enormous thing is the lack of time that people have. Like someone earlier, I've forgotten the name, was discussing Greener Grangetown, and that initiative has been really great because the space has been placed within the city, and it's like it's now a part of everyday life, and people don't really have to take time out of their day to go and care. But I just think people don't have time and they don't have energy. Everyone's overworked, and then if you have people at your door asking you to plant this and plant that, I think life's hard enough, in my view. But I think also there's a lot of people perhaps don't see the value in these space because sometimes it's forgiven. Like in Cardiff, you've got this enormous park and there's litter everywhere, and that's upsetting because we're so lucky to have that. But at the same time, it's treated disrespectfully. So I think it's a balance between taking it for granted and not having enough energy, is how I'd see it. I don't know. What would you guys think?
I agree. I think it would be confidence as well. I mean, people think they need confidence to garden and to do landscaping and things. Definitely time. We're in a cost of living crisis in spite of what was said yesterday in a speech. Sorry. But also I think the time of year and the really biblical rain in Livingston, like we've not had any rain like that in this part of Scotland for, I think, decades. So it was really hard to find some of the GBIs because nothing was growing yet. There were some crocuses and things coming up when I was photographing, but it was mostly, wet soil. But it could be just the local authorities not looking after the area. So it's good to see people from local authorities here who are instigating stuff. More of that would be good, I think.
I think maybe where I struggled with the question, maybe I failed as a photographer because I think people did cherish their green spaces in Barrow. I think often it was like with very little, sort of creating something out of nothing. But maybe the places that did seem more neglected in terms of things like litter, or maybe the categories that we don't really think of as green spaces, like railway corridor. It was like one big fly tip basically along the railway corridor, and we don't in the public consciousness we think, oh, park, green space, and that was very well kept, but we don't think of the sort of brambles along the side of railways being like an important habitat that we should be looking after. And maybe it's because we can't use it physically, so maybe that's where the change. Yeah.
It's all fenced off.
I don't know.
Well, I'm afraid we need to leave it here, but please join our artist and curator after the session, have a chat with them, and join me in thanking them for their amazing work.